The glass doors of O'Hare Airport trembled as the cold March wind swept in, carrying with it the breath of travelers rushing toward their morning flights. Amid that restless flow, Ethan Walker stood still, a 45-year-old black man in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his sharp gaze reflecting off the glass. Outside, a plane bearing the LibertyJet Airlines logo was being towed onto the runway. It was the very airline that had humiliated him. And now, just 1 week later, it belonged to him. He smiled not entirely out of triumph, but because he remembered the moment it all began with nothing more than a denied seat. That morning, the Chicago sky was crystal clear. Ethan left his penthouse overlooking the river, carrying only a single leather suitcase. Down in the lobby, a Tesla waited. The driver bowed and opened the door. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. Your flight to New York departs at 9:15. Ethan nodded slightly. "Thank you, James. I'll be back Thursday evening." The car glided smoothly through streets, just waking up. For most people, it was just another work day. But for Ethan, the CEO of Walker Cyber Systems, a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate, it was the most important day of his year. A meeting with international investors that could take his company global. He didn't use his private jet. No security detail, no entourage. Just himself, as he had done for 20 years. Simple, grounded, never ostentatious. O'Hare was packed that morning, but Ethan was used to the chaos. He passed through security, presented his ID, scanned his digital boarding pass, the same routine he'd done hundreds of times. A security officer smiled. Flying LibertyJet seat, to a first class. Nice choice. Ethan returned the smile politely. No one knew he was a billionaire, and he preferred it that way. At gate 23, Bravo, the LibertyJet sign glowed bright. Passengers gathered around the counter. Ethan checked his Patek Philippe watch, adjusted his tie, and stepped forward as the announcement called first-class boarding. The woman at the counter, her badge reading Denise Clark, glanced at him, and her professional smile vanished. "May I see your printed ticket?" Ethan raised his phone. "I'm using an e-ticket through the LibertyJet app. I've been a Diamond member for 6 years and have never needed a paper copy." Denise frowned. "We need to verify. Please step aside. Is there a problem system issue? I'll assist other passengers first." Her voice turned cold, crisp as a command. Ethan froze for a second. Behind him, a white man in a grey suit lifted his boarding pass. Denise beamed. "Welcome aboard, sir. Enjoy your flight." Ethan watched the scene, heard the familiar beep of the scanner, and asked quietly, "You just scanned his digital pass. Why not mine?" Denise didn't meet his eyes. "Sir, please don't cause a scene. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to call security." The air thickened. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, curious, irritated, judgmental. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken, as if the 20 years he'd spent rising through boardrooms dominated by white executives had all come back to tighten around his chest. "Go ahead," he said calmly. "I'm only asking to be treated fairly." 2 security officers approached, hands resting on their belts. "Is there a problem? This gentleman is refusing to follow procedure," Denise said quickly. Ethan replied evenly. "I showed my ID and a valid boarding pass, but she denied it while others were allowed through." One guard glanced at Ethan's phone, then at Denise. "System error." Denise tapped at her keyboard in a flurry. "No, just a seating adjustment for weight balance." Seat 2A was cancelled. "We've reassigned him to row 32. Weight balance," Ethan repeated, forcing a strained smile. "Am I heavier than that man?" No one answered. "So I'm still flying. Yes, in economy." "Fine," he murmured, taking the new ticket. "But please make sure your name is recorded." Denise hesitated. then forced a polite tone. "You can file a complaint through our system, sir." Ethan walked down the boarding tunnel, passing through first-class rows of empty leather seats, gleaming under the morning light, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes. He kept his head down and continued to the back of the plane. Court Important 2, Charlie wedged between two strangers beside the restroom. Every time the door opened, the flush drowned out the hum of the engines. The air smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. As the plane climbed, Ethan opened his laptop, trying to focus on the presentation for that afternoon's meeting. But the words blurred. The feeling of being diminished, something he thought he had buried at 25 the first time he stood in a boardroom full of white men, rose again, sharp and familiar. Flight attendant Heather Shaw pushed her service cart down the aisle. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" "Just water." "Thank you." She set the cup on his tray without looking at him, without a smile. Moments later, the white man beside him accidentally spilled coffee on Ethan's sleeve. Heather hurried back, handing him a single napkin. "Here, wipe it off." A few rows ahead, a white woman had the same mishap. Heather knelt beside her in concern. "Oh my goodness, let me help you. Here's club soda and some extra napkins." Ethan watched in silence. Part of him wanted to speak up, but another part felt only exhaustion. He took out his phone, opened the Notes app, and began to type March 12th. Liberty Jet Flight 642. Chicago to New York. Seat downgrade without a reason. Subtle discrimination. Record for evidence. Midway through the flight, when he glanced at his watch, the Patek shining under the cabin light, Heather's demeanor suddenly changed. "Oh, nice watch, sir." "Can I get you anything else?" Ethan looked up. "No, thank you." His reply was short, cool enough to make her step back. When the plane landed 30 minutes late, Ethan had to wait another 20 before deplaning. Outside the first class, passengers were already being met by private cars. His driver stood by the taxi line. On the ride into Manhattan, Ethan watched the city through the window, the skyscrapers glinting in the fading light, beautiful, distant, indifferent. The meeting went on as planned. He arrived late, sweat still clinging to his collar. Though he secured the deal, the terms were less favorable than expected, all because of a single first-class seat denied. That night, back in his hotel room, he opened his laptop. The pale glow of the screen lit his thoughtful face. He went to LibertyJet's website and stared at their slogan, "We treat every passenger like family." He let out a quiet laugh, one tinged with bitterness and clarity. This wasn't just a personal wound. It was a system that needed to be changed. And Ethan Walker, the man who had risen from his grandmother's basement in South Chicago, the man once turned away from a job because they already had enough people like him, knew he wouldn't send an email complaint or demand compensation or post a tweet. He would buy the entire company. That was the moment when revenge and justice truly began. Morning light spilled across Manhattan in a silver hue, touching the glass facade of the luxury hotel, where Ethan Walker sat quietly, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He looked down at the street, the people passing by, the yellow taxis, weaving through traffic, the lights reflected on the misty pavement. The city seemed to run perfectly, but inside him, everything had shifted off course. A seat taken away, a cold remark, a doubtful glance, small things, yet they pierced his memory like shards of glass. He had spent half his life proving that he belonged in places where people once told him he didn't deserve to stand. And yesterday morning at O'Hare Airport, he realized that respect, even something as small as a seat, was still something he had to fight for. When he returned to Chicago, Ethan didn't go straight home. He stopped by the headquarters of Walker Cyber Systems, a 60-story glass tower in the Loop, a symbol of how far he had come from his grandmother's tiny basement. He took the elevator to the 38th floor, the executive boardroom. Around the table sat familiar faces: Lauren Price, the smart and resolute, brown-skinned chief operating officer; Daniel Brooks, the weary-eyed but sharp chief financial officer; Andre Miller, the tall, deep-voiced legal advisor; and Naomi King, the head of data analytics, the youngest in the room, but the one who spoke only with numbers, never emotion. Ethan entered, placed his briefcase on the table, and said slowly, "Let's put the New York investment project on hold. I want to talk about my flight yesterday." No one understood at first. Lauren frowned. "Was there a problem with the airline?" Ethan nodded slightly. "Not just a problem, a sign." He told them everything, each detail, each look, each word. How the gate agent rejected his e-ticket, how security closed in, how the flight attendant ignored him until she noticed his expensive watch and suddenly became friendly. When he finished, the room fell silent, as if the air had been drained from it. Daniel put his pen down. "Ethan, I hate to say it, but I'm not surprised. I've been through something similar. 3 months ago, I was pulled aside for an ID check before boarding Liberty Jet. The reason, random screening." Lauren gave a dry laugh, but her eyes darkened. "Random, I've been denied upgrades 3 times in a row despite being a platinum member. And every time it's the same excuse system error." Andre nodded. "I once had a former client who worked for them. He said there were unspoken guidelines about rechecking passengers who didn't fit the first-class image. They never said the word race, but everyone understood." Ethan clenched his fists. "So it's not just me." "No," Lauren replied. "It's a pattern, a culture." Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating their faces. For a moment, Ethan thought of his grandmother Ruth, the woman who once told him, "There are 2 kinds of successful people, Ethan. The ones who climb up and forget where they came from, and the ones who climb up and change the places they were once denied." He took a deep breath. "I'm not letting this go. But we won't react emotionally. We'll do the one thing they fear most, find the truth." Naomi opened her laptop instantly. "What level of data are you looking for?" "All of it. Complaints, posts, reviews, discrimination statistics. If we can get internal records, even better." Lauren nodded. "I'll reach out to a few former employees from Liberty Jet. Some of them left last year. They'll talk," Daniel added. "And I'll look into their financials. I've heard Liberty Jet is losing market share and has bonds coming due soon. A wounded beast usually attacks harder, but it's also easier to bring down." Ethan smiled faintly. "Good. Let's begin." 3 days later, the 38th floor turned into an underground investigation hub. The big screen displayed hundreds of graphs. Naomi pointed at the data. In the past 18 months, there have been 473 public complaints related to discrimination on Liberty Jet flights. Most came from black passengers. That's 8 times higher than the industry average. Andre added, "We have 26 sworn statements from executives of color who were mistreated, downgraded seats, excessive ID checks, denied drinks. The pattern is disturbingly consistent." Lauren opened a printed file. Here's an internal email leaked by a former HR manager. It says, "Passenger appearance inconsistent with premium demographic. Verify manually." They don't say the word race, but the meaning is obvious. The room fell into heavy silence. Daniel turned his laptop toward Ethan. "And this what I found. LibertyJet owes $300 million in corporate bonds due next quarter. They've been quietly looking for rescue funding, but no one wants to invest. Their stock has fallen for 6 consecutive quarters. One more scandal, and they'll collapse. Ethan stood still, a massive puzzle piece, finally clicking into place. It wasn't just discrimination. It was a rotten system, morally and financially. Lauren looked at him. "What are you going to do with this?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He walked toward the glass wall, gazing at the sunlit skyline of Chicago. From this height, everything looked small, but the injustice didn't. "There are 2 options," he said quietly. "1, we sue them. 2, we buy them." Andre frowned. "Buy an airline." "Ethan, that's a long, expensive battle." And staying silent, he turned back as the most painful loss of all. The sunlight glinted in his eyes like a blade of steel. "If I sue, they'll stall, deflect, and eventually move on. But if I own them, I can rewrite every rule inside that system. No one can stop the person who holds the controls." Naomi's voice trembled slightly. "Are you saying a real acquisition?" Ethan nodded. "Not just an acquisition, but reclaiming justice with my own money." The meeting ended. When everyone left, Ethan stayed behind, sitting alone, as sunset light spread across the glass table. Outside, Chicago glowed gold, the skyscrapers touching the clouds, gleaming like the dreams he once chased. He remembered the moment he was downgraded, Denise's cold stare, and the whispers behind him. He must have boarded the wrong cabin. No, he hadn't. They had the ones who thought respect belonged only to one color, one class. Ethan closed his eyes, exhaled, then opened his laptop. On the screen, he typed the first line, "Project Skyfall. Objective: assess the feasibility of acquiring LibertyJet Airlines. Project lead Ethan Walker." At the bottom, he added a small note, one only he would understand. "Not out of anger, out of justice." That night, the wind swept across the Chicago River, carrying the metallic chill of water and steel. In the high-rise office, the light from his laptop reflected off the face of a man who had decided not just to stand up, but to change the sky itself. Far away across the dark horizon, a plane bearing the LibertyJet logo lifted into the night, its white trail stretching across the sky. Ethan watched it, his eyes calm yet burning with an unspoken promise. "Next time, I'll be the one flying it." Morning in Chicago was gloomy, the sky covered in a thin layer of mist, like a curtain hiding whatever was about to come. In the conference room on the 38th floor of Walker Cyber Systems, Ethan Walker sat at the head of the table, a cup of cold coffee in front of him. On the large screen, dozens of data cells, charts, and tense expressions were reflected on his face and on the faces of his closest team. 3 days of investigation, and now every piece of evidence was laid out raw, clear, impossible to deny. Naomi King pointed at the screen. 473 complaints related to black passengers being discriminated against on LibertyJet in the past 18 months. That rate is 8 times higher than other airlines. Numbers do not lie. Daniel Brooks laced his fingers together, his voice rough from lack of sleep. And they are hiding a financial crisis. 6 consecutive quarters of losses. $300 million in bonds coming due. Without new capital, they collapse. Lauren Price flipped through a thick stack of documents. And this is the worst part. A former human resources manager sent me internal emails instructing staff to recheck passengers who do not fit the first-class cabin image. They do not say the word race, but everyone understands. The room fell into silence. The projector hummed softly, and the clock on the wall ticked steadily like it was counting down to an explosion. Ethan stared at the words in front of him. Every number, every internal directive, every accusation hidden under the label of policy. Part of him boiled with anger, another part went cold as ice. He had lived long enough in the business world to know that racism did not always shout. Sometimes it wore a suit, carried a smile, and was called company guidelines. He spoke softly but clearly. We are not going to respond with outrage. We are going to respond with strategy. Andre Miller, his attorney, leaned on the table. What exactly do you mean? Ethan looked around, his eyes steady, solid as hardwood. They think a $50 voucher is enough. They think I will stay quiet like hundreds of others. They are wrong. I am going to force them to face the very system they built. He paused for a beat, then continued. But not in court. I want control. I am going to buy Liberty Jet. The room shook, metaphorically. Naomi's mouth fell open, and Daniel almost dropped his pen. Lauren was the first to regain her composure. Ethan, you know what you are saying, right? An airline with a $4 billion market capitalization. This is not a tech startup. This is a financial beast. Ethan nodded slightly. And that is exactly why it is ready to fall. We are not going to buy it publicly. We will buy quietly through holding companies, through intermediary funds. No one will know until I hold a controlling stake. Daniel opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. I can identify the major shareholders who are looking to sell. If we break the purchases into smaller pieces, accumulate slowly, no one will pay attention. Andre cut in. Andre. But legally, once you cross 5% ownership, the Securities Commission will require disclosure of the true beneficial owner. Ethan replied, which is why we break it even smaller. 10 companies. 10 different names. By the time they realize it, I will already control more than 1/3. Naomi smiled for the first time during the entire meeting. A coup in the sky. No, Ethan said, his voice dropping lower. A redemption of dignity. That afternoon, they worked straight through until sunset swallowed the glass walls. City lights blinked on, reflected across the conference table in streaks of bright light like fire. Ethan stood and spoke firmly. I want a plan in 48 hours. Daniel identified the most volatile shareholders. Lauren build a list of internal witnesses who can confirm discriminatory policies. Naomi keeps scraping social media data. Find more patterns. Andre, I need you to prepare the legal framework for setting up the secondary investment entities. Everyone nodded. The room suddenly fell into a focused silence, no longer just a workplace, but a war room. Late that night, after everyone had left, Ethan remained by himself. The warm yellow light reflected off the glass tabletop, spreading like a pool of water. He unlocked his phone and scrolled through unread messages, meeting invitations, client emails, financial reports. But his eyes stopped on one message from a single person, Maya, his daughter. I saw the video people recorded of you at the airport. I am okay. But I hate the way they looked at you. I hate that they think you do not belong. Ethan bit his lip softly as a bitter sting pressed against his heart. He replied, It is all right, sweetheart. I will make them see differently, not with anger, but with justice. 2 days later, the plan was complete. They called it Project Horizon, the Horizon Line of Change. Daniel reported Liberty Jet has 7 major shareholders who hold more than 60% of its stock. 3 of them are already looking for buyers. If we approach them the right way, we can secure 15% within 2 weeks. Naomi added, Data analysis shows the public is starting to talk about LibertyJet more negatively. If we give it a little push, stir up some old stories, the share price will drop, which will let us buy cheaper. Andre glanced at Ethan. You are sure you want to go this far? This will not just be a deal. It will be a war. Ethan answered with absolute certainty. If a system decides who deserves respect, then that system needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. I do not want revenge. I want rebirth. On Monday morning, the first trades began. Small buy orders scattered through funds in New York, San Francisco, and Toronto. Shares were collected. One by one, intermediary names were created one by one. A secret network slowly formed under Ethan's direction, silent, precise, and dangerous. But before he moved to Phase 2, Andre advised Ethan give them one last chance. Send a formal letter. If they still stay silent, no one can say you were unfair. Ethan nodded. All right. We will remind them of the fairness they chose to forget. The next morning, he sat in his office and drafted the letter. His fingers moved slowly across the keyboard. To the leadership board of LibertyJet Airlines, I am writing not to request compensation, but to ask for change. I believe that discrimination does not only insult individuals, it also damages the brand value of your company. I request a comprehensive review of your customer service policies and staff training procedures. This is not a threat. This is an opportunity. Sincerely, Ethan Walker, LibertyJet Diamond member, Chief Executive Officer of Walker Cyber Systems. He read it over once more, then pressed send. As the email left his outbox, he knew the battle had begun. 5 days later, an envelope from LibertyJet arrived at his office. The shiny blue and silver logo gleamed on the paper. Ethan carefully tore the edge and pulled out a printed letter. We are very sorry for your experience not meeting expectations. Enclosed is a $50 voucher for your next flight. We hope to serve you better in the future. Lauren finished reading, set the letter down, and her eyes blazed. $50. That is what they think your dignity is worth. Ethan smiled a smile with no joy in it. No. It is proof that they do not understand what is coming. He folded the letter, slipped it into a new envelope, and labeled it Evidence File Item 1. Then he looked out through the glass wall where birds were cutting across the grey sky. Call Goldman Sachs, he said quietly. We are going to need an investment team. Outside, the Chicago sky hung heavy and grey. But to Ethan, it was not a sign of a storm. It was a sign of a quiet revolution about to sweep through an entire industry. A LibertyJet plane sliced through the clouds, leaving a long white trail behind it. Ethan watched it, his gaze deep, his voice nearly a whisper. This time, I am not just sitting in first class. I will be the one flying the plane. The Houston sky felt like it was on fire. Palm trees swayed weakly in the heavy, scorching wind as Ethan Walker stepped out of the black sedan, straightened his tie, and looked up at the massive glass headquarters of LibertyJet Airlines. Under the harsh sun, the airline's silver-blue logo shimmered proud and cold, just like the way this system treated people who did not fit the first-class image. Inside the lobby, the air conditioning blasted so hard it almost burned his skin with cold. A receptionist smiled. Good morning, Mr. Walker. You have an appointment with Mr. Harrington, our Chief Executive Officer, at 11 o'clock. That is right, Ethan replied. Thank you. He sat down in the waiting area. The clock showed 10:58. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. A group of white executives arrived and were immediately invited into the conference room ahead of him. Ethan remained seated, ignored. A young assistant finally appeared wearing a thin, perfunctory smile. "Mr. Harrington can give you 15 minutes. Please follow me." Ethan stood and walked down a thick, carpeted hallway, flanked on both sides by brand pride photos, all white faces in pilot uniforms, flight attendants and premium passengers raising champagne glasses. One picture in particular caught his eye, a slogan that read, "Where every passenger feels valued." He let out a quiet breath. How ironic. The door to the chief executive officer's office opened, revealing a bright, spacious room flooded with light. Behind the desk, Charles Harrington, in his early 60s graying hair, heavy-set build, stood up, but did not extend his hand. "Mr. Walker, I hear you are interested in our cybersecurity contract." His voice was even polite to the point of being empty. Ethan took a seat. "Actually, I am here to talk about something more serious." Charles frowned slightly. "Oh, I only have 15 minutes. Please get to the point." Ethan opened his bag, pulled out a thick file, and placed it gently on the desk. "Last week, I was denied my first-class seat on one of your flights, despite having a confirmed ticket. Not only that, I have investigated and discovered this is not an isolated incident. Hundreds of other black passengers have experienced the same thing." Charles crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. "These are serious accusations, but I am sure this is just a misunderstanding. LibertyJet does not discriminate." Ethan looked straight into his eyes, his voice calm to the point of being cold. "We have data witness statements and internal documents. You call that a misunderstanding? Then read this." Charles flipped through a few pages, then closed the file and sighed, as if dealing with someone who was wasting his time. "Mr. Walker, we serve millions of passengers every year. Sometimes there are minor issues. If you are unhappy, I can have our customer service department send you a formal apology. That is all." Ethan swallowed his anger. "I already spoke to them, and to your vice president. They called my downgrade a misunderstanding and sent me a $50 voucher." Charles smirked. "I see. Perhaps my staff handled it without enough finesse. I will make sure they are corrected." Ethan placed both hands on the desk, his voice dropping lower. "This is not about finesse, Mr. Harrington. It is about discrimination. I do not want compensation. I want change." Charles's expression shifted from forced friendliness to steel. "Mr. Walker, you are a businessman. You know accusations like these can severely damage a company's image. My advice to you is this: do not turn this into a public case. It will not benefit anyone. Public or not, I am still going to act," Ethan replied, his eyes flashing like a blade. "I am giving you a chance to fix this before I am forced to make LibertyJet answer for it." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat? No, it is a warning." The air thickened. The ticking of the clock sounded loud in the quiet office. Charles stood and signaled the end of the meeting. "I think this conversation should end here. If you intend to pursue this further, let our lawyers handle it. I have a very good legal team, Mr. Walker." Ethan rose as well and nodded slightly. "Good. So do I." He turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. "One interesting thing, Mr. Harrington. When I was denied boarding in first class, your staff also called security. Now that I am talking about the truth, you want to send in the lawyers. It seems calling in the enforcers is LibertyJet's standard procedure whenever a black man starts asking questions." Anger flashed in Charles's eyes. "I want you out of my office now." "Gladly." The door closed behind Ethan. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone and called Andre. "You were right. He has no intention of changing anything. What do you want me to do? Start phase 2. Call Goldman Sachs. We are going for a takeover. That afternoon, on the flight back to Chicago, Ethan sat by the window, looking down at the clouds spread out like a sea of white cotton. He did not know exactly what awaited him, only that from the moment he walked out of that office, the road back had been burned away. In his jacket pocket was a small notebook, an old habit from his startup days. He opened to a fresh page and wrote 3 lines. 1 justice does not come from apologies. 2. The most powerful person is the one who dares to stand up 3 from today. On I am not just demanding a seat. I am taking back the sky. 2 weeks later, the takeover campaign quietly began. Project Horizon rolled out like a hidden machine. 10 subsidiaries were registered. Hundreds of small buy orders were placed out of New York, Toronto, and San Francisco, all flowing toward one final destination, Ethan Walker. Daniel reported, "We are at 12% ownership. The media has not noticed anything. If we keep this pace in 3 more weeks, we will hit 25%. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the darkening sky. Good. Stay quiet. They cannot fight what they do not know about. Lauren cut in Ethan if they find out they will strike back. Through the media, through the courts, through anything they can use. Ethan turned around, his gaze carved in stone. I know. But this time, I have the truth on my side. That evening, Ethan returned to his house by Lake Michigan. Maya, his daughter, was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red. In her hands was an iPad open to an article titled, "Billionaire Ethan Walker, playing the victim a showdown between a black CEO and a leading airline." She looked up, her voice shaking. "They say you are putting on a show for attention. They say you are playing the race card to pressure the airline." Ethan let out a quiet sigh and sat beside her. That is how they react when they are afraid, Maya. They attack the person instead of answering the truth. But I saw my friend sharing that article. Tyler Harrington. He said you are trying to destroy his family. Tyler is Charles's nephew, Ethan said softly. And you know when an empire is afraid, it starts hiding behind its children. Maya turned away as tears fell. I just want you to stop. I am scared. Ethan squeezed her hand. I understand. But if I stop, this world will go on devaluing people like me. And one day it will devalue you too. I cannot let that happen. That night, after Maya had fallen asleep, Ethan called Ruth, the 84-year-old woman who had raised him. Her voice trembled, but still carried its old strength. Ethan, you are up against people who are not afraid of much. But they are afraid of one thing, the truth. If you go all the way, do not let anger lead you. Let justice be your compass. I am afraid my daughter will not understand. She will, Ruth replied. When she sees you fight for what is right, she will learn strength from that. If you back down, all she will learn is how to bow her head. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he spoke softly. Thank you, Ruth. Outside, the wind swept across the surface of the lake, cold and deep. Ethan stared into the darkness, feeling a new resolve burn inside him. Tomorrow, Charles Harrington would begin to feel the first tremors, the shaking he himself had caused on the day he ordered a black man named Ethan Walker out of first class. And when that storm finally hit, it would not only sweep away a chief executive officer, it would change an entire sky. 1 week after the call with Ruth, the sky over Chicago was covered in gray clouds. The storm Ethan Walker had predicted had arrived, but it was not in the sky. It exploded online on television and across the front pages of the major financial newspapers. Bold headlines screamed, Walker Cyber Systems suspected of selling customer data. CEO denies allegations. And man suing Liberty Jet, hiding a tech scandal of his own. Within 24 hours, Walker Cyber Systems stock plummeted 38%. Hundreds of calls, emails, and messages poured in. Partners demanded clarification. Government agencies launched urgent investigations. Ethan sat in his office, the glow from the screens washing over a face that was calm but cold as stone. Lauren Price slammed a stack of files onto the table. We know who did this. Fake documents, forged signatures, IP traces leading back to Houston. Ethan nodded slightly. Charles Harrington. Daniel Brooks cut in. He is using the media to burn your reputation to the ground. If the market loses confidence, we will not be able to keep buying Liberty Jet shares. Andre Miller's voice was ragged. Do you want me to file a defamation suit? Ethan shook his head. Not yet. If we sue now, it will only make them think I am on the defensive. We hit back with the truth. After many sleepless nights, Naomi King pushed her screen toward the others. The emails the press released have timestamp errors. Our internal system changed formats in May last year, but those files are still using the old format. They were created from Liberty Jet's own servers. Ethan's hand tightened, his voice low like a growl. Good, then we have a trail. He lifted his head. Andre, prepare a file for the Securities Commission. Daniel, hold the shares, no selling, no retreat. Lauren, call the tech media. We are not going to plead our case. We are going to publish forensic proof and let the truth speak for itself. But while Ethan was steering the storm outside, another one crashed in from a place he did not expect Maya Walker. His 16-year-old daughter stood in the doorway of his office, eyes red phone clutched in her hand. Dad, they are making memes about me. Ethan looked up. What, they took my photo from school and posted it with the caption, Data Princess, daughter of the man who sells user secrets. The whole class laughed. Tyler, he said, you are just a hypocrite. Ethan stood and walked toward her. Maya, listen to me. I do not want to listen. You are dragging our whole family into your war. She shouted, tears spilling over. You know what? I was not the one downgraded. I was not the one humiliated in front of 100 people because of my skin color. But you were. And I cannot let that happen again. And in exchange for what, Dad? Your reputation, the company, me? Maya choked on the words. I just want a normal life. The door slammed behind her. The sound of her sobs faded down the long hallway. Ethan stood frozen, his hand still hanging in midair. In that moment, a man who had faced hundreds of high-stakes deals suddenly felt more powerless than ever, not in front of the market, but in front of his own child. That night, he called Olivia his ex-wife. Her voice was gentle but firm. She is under a lot of pressure. School is buzzing, reporters are lurking. Tyler Harrington, Charles's nephew, is saying terrible things about you. Ethan, I understand why you are doing this, but Maya feels trapped between two worlds. Ethan sighed. I know. But if I stop now, everything I have endured will be pointless. And she will grow up in a society that has not changed at all. Maybe, Olivia replied slowly. But do not let your pursuit of justice make you forget compassion. She does not need a hero. She needs her father. After the call, Ethan sat still in the dark. Rain tapped softly against the glass. He remembered Ruth's words. Sometimes you have to let your child see you fight so they can learn how to stand up. He nodded to himself. You will understand, Maya. Not today, but one day. The next morning, Lauren walked in, her face exhausted but glowing. Ethan, good news. TechCrunch just ran a story. Claims against Walker. Cyber systems show signs of being fabricated. Falsified evidence traced back to Liberty Jet servers. It is spreading fast. Daniel let out a small laugh. The market is reacting. The stock has already recovered 12%. Andre added, "The Securities Commission has officially opened an investigation into Liberty Jet for market manipulation. Harrington has been summoned." Ethan only smiled faintly, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. Good. He thought planting fake stories was the finale. No, it was just the opening act. At the same time in Houston, Charles Harrington stood in his office and slammed the newspaper onto his desk. Idiots. Who authorized those emails to go out without scrubbing the trail? His assistant trembled. "So the IT department said we checked them. We did not expect the other side to uncover it this fast." Charles pounded his fist on the table. "Walker will pay. If he thinks he can play games with the market, he is mistaken. Call our media contacts. Push the narrative of CEO out of control, obsessed with racial issues. I want public opinion to turn against him." When the assistant left, Charles looked outside. A storm front was rolling in. Thunder boomed his reflection, flickering on the glass, warped and shaky. That same day, Ethan received a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Stop, or your family will suffer the consequences." Andre read it, brow furrowing. "They are threatening you. Should I call the police?" Ethan shook his head. "No. But increase security for Maya and Olivia. I will not let them get anywhere near my family." Lauren stepped forward, her voice grave. "Ethan, you are fighting someone who has no boundaries. Charles Harrington is willing to burn the world down to keep his throne." Ethan gave a faint smile, his eyes eerily calm. "And I am willing to rebuild that world, even if I have to walk through ashes." 3 days later, Liberty Jet held a press conference. Charles stood at the podium, his face confident, as if no scandal had ever touched him. "Liberty Jet has always upheld the value of equality," he said. "The accusations from Mr. Walker are completely baseless. This is nothing more than a stunt by a struggling tech company trying to distract the public." In a dark room in Chicago, Ethan watched the live broadcast. Every word Charles spoke sounded like a gold-plated knife, smooth, polished, and poisoned. When the host asked, "What do you think about the Securities Commission investigating Liberty Jet?" Charles smiled and lifted his chin. "We are fully cooperating. I am confident they will soon see what is real and what is fake news." Ethan stared straight at the screen and whispered, "Enjoy the spotlight while you can, Charles. It is about to go dark." That night, after everyone had left the office, Ethan stayed alone. On his desk lay an old photograph, him, Maya, and Ruth in their small house on the South Side years ago. Back then he had sworn, "No one will ever put us down again." Now he knew that promise was being tested. He was not just fighting a man, he was fighting an entire legacy of injustice wrapped in prestige and power. He opened his laptop and sent a message to the investment team. "Accelerate the share purchases. All plans remain confidential. If they want a war, we will fight it their way, but with the truth." Wind howled outside the window, whipping loose pages off the desk. Ethan stood and looked out as the rain began to fall, each drop hitting the glass with heavy force. In a flash of lightning, his reflection appeared no longer just a tech CEO, but a relentless fighter ready to tear apart the invisible chains that had bound him all his life. "They started this war with lies," he murmured. "I will end it with the truth." And in that moment, in the middle of a stormy Chicago night, Ethan Walker understood the real tempest had begun, and this time he was the eye of the storm. 2 weeks after Charles Harrington's fiery press conference, the air in Chicago felt thick like a storm waiting to break. On the 38th floor of Walker Cyber Systems, Ethan Walker stood in front of a digital board filled with blazing red numbers, stock indexes, ownership percentages, lines of data shifting every second. But this time, the red no longer meant loss. It was the color of attack. Daniel Brooks, the chief financial officer, looked up from his screen, his voice brimming with excitement. "We just hit 29% of Liberty Jet's shares, Ethan, all through intermediaries. No one can trace it back to us." Lauren Price folded her arms, her eyes shining. "They still have not realized we are cutting their throat in the dark. The market thinks these are just regular investment funds." Ethan smiled, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Keep the pace. By the time they notice, it will already be too late." Andre Miller cut in. "I hate to be the one to throw cold water on this, but Charles Harrington is not stupid. He will smell this sooner or later. My bet is within a week." Ethan nodded, his voice steady. "That is why we push harder. Target is 35% in 10 days. On the 4th day, an internal source from Houston called. A man's voice came through hoarse and urgent. "I cannot talk long. Harrington knows someone is accumulating shares. He is furious. He has called an emergency board meeting." Ethan asked, "Who are you?" "I am just someone on the board, and I have seen enough. Liberty Jet is rotting from the inside. I will not let him bury this company along with his dirty games." "My name is Gregory Allen." The line went dead. Ethan looked around the table at the 4 people he trusted most, all waiting for his reaction. "You heard him," he said. "The game has been exposed. It is no longer quiet. Now it is open warfare." That same day, the press moved in unison. Headlines exploded with Mystery Investment Group quietly taking over Liberty Jet Airlines. Charles Harrington called for an emergency meeting. In the executive room in Houston, he flung a newspaper onto the table. "Find out who is behind this. I want names, addresses, phone numbers, everything." His assistant replied, voice shaking. "We traced as far as we could. These entities link indirectly to Walker Holdings." The air turned solid. Charles stood frozen for a few seconds. Then his voice dropped, drenched in venom. "Walker, that damned man thinks he can buy me fine. If he wants war, I will show him what hell looks like." 2 days later, the Wall Street Review ran a story. Walker Cyber Systems facing potential loss of government contracts. It was false, but damaging enough to send Ethan's stock sliding again. Banks tightened credit lines all at once. A few nervous shareholders begged him to stop the campaign. In the conference room, Daniel spoke quickly. "Our liquidity is being squeezed. Without fresh capital, we cannot keep buying Liberty Jet shares." Lauren replied, "Harrington is leveraging political connections. It looks like he is pulling people in the Department of Transportation to put pressure on us." Andre exhaled heavily. This is no longer a financial battle. This is political war. Ethan rose, hands in his pockets, eyes unwavering. Exactly. And this war will not be won with money. It will be won with truth. He turned to Naomi King, head of data. "Naomi, what do we have?" "We have traced deleted logs on Liberty Jet servers. They erased hundreds of complaint reports related to racial discrimination. If we can fully recover them, that is a bomb." Ethan nodded. "Do it. I want that evidence before the weekend." That night, Ethan drove home alone. On the radio, the news anchor's voice cut through the dark. "Sources say Liberty Jet is preparing to file a lawsuit against Walker Holdings for hostile takeover attempts. He turned off the radio and let out a dry laugh. Streetlights slid across the windshield, slicing his face into light and shadow. One half was the cold chief executive officer, the other a tired man carrying the wounds of his past. He remembered Maya's words. "You are dragging our whole family into your war." Now that war had gone far beyond a first-class seat. It had become a fight to reclaim dignity for an entire generation. 3 days later, Naomi walked into the conference room, eyes red from lack of sleep, but an external hard drive in her hand. "I got it." Ethan brought the main screen to life. Data appeared line after line of deleted reports. Black customer denied boarding in first class. Flight attendant ordered extra ID checks because passenger did not look like premium class. Andre whispered, "My God, this is an entire cover-up operation." Lauren looked at Ethan, her voice trembling. "With this, you can drag the entire Liberty Jet leadership in front of Congress." Ethan shook his head. "No, I do not want to drag them into court. I want to drag them off their throne." The next day, Ethan ordered the information released with a turning the wind strategy, not under his own name, but through anonymous sources to Bloomberg and Reuters. The story appeared the very next morning. Leaked internal records show Liberty Jet Airlines deleted hundreds of discrimination complaints. Liberty Jet stock dropped 15% in just 2 hours. Major investors panicked and began to dump their positions. Gregory Allen, the board member, called Ethan in secret. "Harrington is losing control. The board is split. If you get another 5%, you will have the right to nominate people to the board of directors." Ethan looked at Daniel. "We are at 29%. Buy more now. I want 30% before sunrise." The next morning, Charles Harrington appeared on television, his face pale but still trying to project arrogance. "Liberty Jet is an American symbol," he declared. "We will not let an outsider destroy us." At the same time in Chicago, Ethan held a fresh fax from Goldman Sachs confirming the latest share purchase. He looked at the number, 31.4%. He smiled. "You spoke too late, Charles." But Charles refused to retreat. He ordered his legal team to trigger a poison pill, a defensive measure against takeovers. If any single party owned more than 30%, the company would issue new shares, diluting everyone's stakes. When Ethan received the news, he only frowned slightly. Andre was furious. "He is playing dirty. These new shares will wipe out our advantage." Ethan answered with a strange calm. "No, Andre. That is exactly where he makes his mistake." Lauren was confused. What mistake a poison pill is only legal if the board approved it before any takeover attempt began. He just violated corporate law with his own hands. Ethan turned back to the table, his voice hard as steel. "Prepare a lawsuit in the Delaware court. I want that poison pill frozen immediately. Once we get the injunction, we will buy the entire Transco fund's stake." Daniel looked at him and sighed. "You are putting everything on the line, Ethan." Ethan smiled. "This is not a gamble, Daniel. This is a judgment." 2 days later, the court's decision was announced. The activation of Liberty Jet Airlines' poison pill is temporarily suspended. The investor is allowed to continue acquiring shares while the matter is under review. That afternoon, heavy rain pounded Houston. In Liberty Jet's conference room, Charles Harrington slammed his hand on the table. "He won 1 round, but this is not over. I am still the chief executive officer, and I will never let him take my seat." But at that same moment in Chicago, Ethan received a message from Goldman Sachs. "Transaction completed. Walker Holdings now owns 55% of LibertyJet Airlines. He stood silent for a few seconds, then said softly, "The game is over." Lauren looked up, eyes brimming. Daniel let his pen fall. Andre gave a quiet laugh. Naomi lifted her phone and recorded the moment when a man who had once been kicked out of first class became the new owner of the sky. Outside the windows, lightning tore the sky in two. Ethan watched the sheets of rain and spoke slowly, as if making a vow. The day they called security to push me away from that boarding gate, I made myself a promise. Next time I walk through that door, they will stand up to greet me. And that day had finally come. On Monday morning, the sky over Houston felt strangled by a thick layer of dark grey clouds. In the grand lobby of LibertyJet Airlines headquarters, dozens of reporters crowded together, camera flashes exploding in rapid bursts. News of the historic takeover had spread across every financial channel overnight. Ethan Walker, the first black chief executive officer to gain control of a major national airline. Meanwhile, on the top floor, inside a lavish, oval-shaped boardroom, the atmosphere was as dense as gun smoke. At the head of the table, Charles Harrington's face, flushed red, and eyes streaked with veins glared at the newspaper in his hand. On the front page, a photo of Ethan Walker, smiling in front of the LibertyJet logo, with a bold headline, "From denied seat to the throne." Charles crushed the paper in his fist. That bastard dared to turn me into a joke. No one in the room answered. The executives kept their heads down, avoiding his gaze. The door opened. The secretary announced Mr. Walker has arrived. Footsteps echoed evenly across the wooden floor. Ethan walked in, wearing a charcoal grey suit, his eyes calm, his face free of visible emotion. Behind him were Lauren Price, Andre Miller, and two attorneys representing the new shareholder group. Charles did not stand. "Mr. Walker," he said, drawing out the words with mocking emphasis, "I'm afraid you are getting ahead of yourself. Your stake in this company is still under legal dispute." Ethan took the seat opposite him and opened the file in front of him. "There is no dispute anymore. The Delaware court has rejected your appeal. I am now the controlling shareholder, 55%. He slid the court order across the table, blue ink and a bright red seal stamped at the bottom. The room fell dead silent. A few directors glanced nervously at one another. Charles let out a cold smile. "You think a few pieces of paper mean you can run an airline? You have no experience, no connections, no power." Ethan replied slowly, each word cutting like a blade. "But I have the truth, and the truth can bring this entire empire down." He switched on the large screen in the center of the room. Images appeared, a chain of internal emails showing dates, times, senders, and recipients. Lauren spoke up. "This is proof that LibertyJet deleted 172 discrimination complaints in the past 12 months. There are direct instructions from the executive office under Mr. Harrington's authority." One director asked timidly, "Is this real?" Charles growled, "Of course it is fabricated. A complete lie. I will sue." Ethan clicked to the next slide. An audio recording played Charles's own voice, low, rough, dripping with contempt. "Keep first class on brand. I do not want to see anyone who is the wrong color tone in the front row." The entire room froze. Several directors turned pale. Andre spoke. That remark was recorded at the Internal Leadership Summit in February, and 3 witnesses have confirmed it. Charles slammed his hand on the table. "Turn that garbage off. No one is going to believe this staged nonsense." Ethan did not react to the outburst. He simply said, his voice deep but clear, "You call it garbage. I call it the truth." And this is what the truth has done. He clicked again, the screen filled with social media posts, news headlines, and stock charts. LibertyJet had lost 40% of its value in a single month. Major investors were pulling out. Ethan looked around the table. I am not here for revenge. I am here to save this company from the man who is dragging it under. The air grew heavier. The board members started whispering among themselves. Gregory Allen, the director who had secretly backed Ethan, finally spoke. Mr. Harrington, you told us LibertyJet would bounce back on market confidence. These numbers show the opposite. We need a leadership change, and we need it now. Charles sprang to his feet and shouted, You too, Gregory. After more than 10 years on my payroll, you paid me with lies, Gregory replied calmly. I have been silent long enough. Another director added, I agree. If what Mr. Walker has presented is true, we have a duty to act for our shareholders and our employees. The room buzzed with low voices. Each murmur felt like a dagger sliding into Charles's back. He turned to Ethan, his face blazing red. What do you want, money, a seat? An apology. Ethan looked him straight in the eye. I want accountability, and I want this company to belong to people who deserve it, not to men who think skin color determines worth. Charles sneered. Cheap ideals. You do not understand aviation, Walker. This industry does not run on morals. It runs on profit. Ethan stood. You are half right. It needs both. And because you chose only profit, you have now lost both. Gregory signaled to the secretary. A sealed envelope was placed on the table. He said, an emergency board session was held this morning under Article 4.2 of the Corporate Charter. The vote result is 6 in favor and 3 against. The decision is to remove Charles Harrington from the position of Chief Executive Officer of LibertyJet Airlines, effective immediately. Charles stood there in shock. His face turned chalk white. You have no right. I am still. The door opened. 2 security officers entered, no instructions needed. Ethan remained still, watching the scene. The same man who had once had security called on him at a boarding gate, now seeing the chief executive who did it being escorted out by his own guards. Charles glanced back, his eyes burning with hatred. You think you have won, Walker? You will regret this. They will never let a black man run one of the country's biggest airlines. Ethan did not answer him. He simply said quietly, You are wrong. I am not here to run an airline. I am here to change the entire industry. The door closed behind Charles. The boardroom sank back into silence. Gregory turned to Ethan. The board has unanimously voted to invite you to serve as executive chairman, overseeing the transition period. Do you accept? Ethan drew a deep breath. I will, but not to rule. I will do it to rebuild this company. He looked around the room at faces that were now a mix of respect and cautious hope. The day I was thrown off that flight, I thought justice was just a dream. Today, I know justice does not arrive on its own. Someone has to drag it into reality. A younger director asked, What is the first thing you will do, Mr.? Chairman Ethan glanced out the window where the Houston sky was finally clearing after the rain. The first thing he murmured with a small smile. I will make sure every employee understands that respect is not a policy. It is the foundation. That afternoon, Ethan walked down to the ground floor, passing through the main lobby. Hundreds of LibertyJet employees had gathered, faces tight with worry and fear. News of the chief executive's removal had spread like lightning. When he appeared, the crowd fell silent. He stopped in the center of the hall, his voice warm but firm. I know you are all afraid. But today, no one is losing their job. I am not here to destroy. I am here to rebuild." His eyes swept across faces of every skin tone and every uniform. From this moment on, Liberty Jet will be a place where everyone has the same chance, whether they are a customer, an employee, or a pilot. This is not just an airline. This is a sky built on respect. A wave of applause broke out, then grew into full cheering. Ethan smiled, not with triumph, but with relief. On the upper floor, Lauren watched through the glass as Ethan stood in the middle of the crowd. She whispered to Andre. "He did it." Andre nodded. "Not yet. This is only the beginning." Down in the lobby, Ethan looked up at the glass ceiling, where sunlight was cutting through the clouds and pouring onto the shining Liberty Jet emblem. He whispered, as if speaking to himself, and to every soul that had ever been turned away, "This sky finally belongs to all of us." Overnight, Houston woke to a headline that sent shockwaves through the nation. Charles Harrington fired Liberty Jet under new ownership. Newspapers splashed photos of Ethan Walker stepping out of the glass tower, surrounded by hundreds of applauding employees. While the public was still reeling from the news, Ethan had already begun his first mission to save the soul of the company. He appointed Sofia Alvarez, a seasoned chief operating officer, as the interim chief executive officer, a calm and capable Latina woman who had once been denied promotion by Charles because she didn't fit the brand image. Now she was back standing beside Ethan in the company's first all-staff meeting. Liberty Jet will no longer be a symbol of privilege, Sophia declared, her voice steady and resolute. Starting today, we will become a model of fairness. Ethan stepped forward, his deep voice carrying across the hall. I did not buy this company to get revenge. I bought it to create change so that those who were once looked down upon would know that respect does not need permission. It is a human right. Thunderous applause filled the room. Many employees were moved to tears. Within just 40 days, a wave of transformation began sweeping through the company. Hidden discriminatory procedures were erased, and the entire service team underwent retraining. The employee evaluation form was rewritten, and the very first line read, "Respecting passengers is our top priority." Ethan established an Ethics and Equality Committee led by Lauren Price, giving every employee the freedom to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. Naomi King led a data transparency project, building a real-time customer feedback system, open and visible on every flight. Daniel Brooks, with his sharp financial instincts, restructured all outstanding debts, restoring the company's liquidity. Within just 2 months, Liberty Jet was profitable again. One morning, Ethan walked through the renovated boarding hall at Houston Airport. There were no more subtle barriers, no more judgmental looks. At counter 1A, he spotted Denise Clark, the woman who had once downgraded his seat, now serving as the head of customer experience. Their eyes met and she looked uneasy. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, "I still don't understand why you kept me." Ethan smiled gently. "Because you were honest. And because someone who was once part of the problem, if willing to change, can become the best person to prevent that problem from happening again." She bowed her head, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." On the day of the rebranding, every Liberty Jet aircraft carried a new name, Unity Air. The new logo featured 2 wings merging as one half white, half black, a symbol of unity. Standing before thousands of employees at the launch ceremony, Ethan's voice rose under the dazzling lights. Unity Air is not just an airline, It is a promise that everyone deserves to fly under the same sky. Behind him, the Houston sky opened up, clear and blue. A plane with the new logo roared upward, leaving behind a long white trail across the heavens, the first mark of a new era of equality. 1 year after the day he was denied a first-class seat, Ethan Walker stood on the top floor of Unity Air's new headquarters, gazing through the clear glass wall. Below him, dozens of aircraft bearing the white and black wing emblem were taking off, gliding smoothly into the clouds. The company had not only been reborn, but had become a global model for corporate equality. Business schools around the world now taught the Unity Effect, the study of how one ethical act can redefine an entire market. The press called Ethan the man who turned humiliation into a revolution. But he only smiled. "I didn't change the world," he said in his final interview as chairman. "I just refused to stay still when I saw something wrong." As he walked out of the airport, a young black girl held her mother's hand, pointed up at a plane ascending into the sky, and shouted with joy, "Mum, I'm going to be a pilot for Unity." Ethan smiled softly. The sky that day was an impossible shade of blue, as if the world itself had been remade, fairer, lighter, and more beautiful than ever before. Late in the afternoon, the golden light of sunset spread across the Houston sky. Ethan Walker walked slowly through the glass corridor of Unity Air headquarters, holding his letter of resignation, the final line reading, "Every system endures only when it is built upon justice." He stopped by the window, where his reflection looked back at him, not the powerful billionaire, but the man who had once been humiliated at an airport gate. A drop of memory fell into place, the scornful glance, the revoked ticket, the sound of security calling his name. And then he smiled because that very moment of humiliation had given birth to a revolution. In the distance, the roar of an engine echoed. A Unity airplane soared across the sky, leaving behind a trail of light like a wordless thank you. Ethan spoke softly, his voice deep and warm. "Justice doesn't need someone perfect. It only needs one person brave enough to say, 'Enough.'" He turned away, his silhouette blending into the golden dusk, a quiet reminder that sometimes, to change the world, all it takes is one person who refuses to stay silent. From the perspective of a leadership ethics expert, Ethan Walker's journey is not merely a story of restoring justice, but proof that true strength lies in how we respond to injustice. He chose not to retaliate, but to rebuild, turning pain into the power to change an entire system. If you believe that justice doesn't need to be loud, only steadfast, then click like to help spread that message and subscribe so you don't miss more stories that inspire. And leave a comment below with these words: "Keep justice."